Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association. Missouri produces wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details on the variety of products made in the state are at choosewood.com.
We hope you enjoy listening to this podcast of St. Louis on the Air, brought to you by University College at Washington University. With undergraduate and graduate programs, part-time, evening, and online. University College at Washington University, offering world-class education within reach.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh. We're discussing how well or how poorly St. Louis area drivers do in bad weather. This as a wintry storm is forecast for the weekend, while the horror show of last week's storm has stranded drivers is still fresh in our memories. Joining me in studio to talk about it all are Kent Flake, Commissioner of Streets for the City of St. Louis, and Mike Wright is Vice President of Public Affairs for the AAA Auto Club of Missouri. Gentlemen, thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Kent, especially you, because I'm sure it's a busy day for you as you prepare for what's coming. What is coming as far as you know?
That's a good question. Following the forecast is always entertaining, but sounds like 2 to 3 inches starting around 7 p.m. to about 2 p.m. or 7 a.m. to about 2 p.m.
So how are you getting ready here in the city for that?
For this storm, we can't do much. Typically, we go out and pre-treat. With all the rain, I can put pre-treat out there. It's just going to go down the drain, so that'd be kind of silly. So we're just preparing our trucks and probably going to come in tomorrow morning.
Well, let's keep our fingers crossed and hope we don't get anything near like what we had last week. And speaking of last week, Mike Wright, there were a lot of comments made then, as has been the case in the past, about how well we do in bad weather, particularly snow, but also in rain. They say St. Louis drivers are not very good at it.
Well, I don't know that I could say that, agree with that. We have nothing to compare them to. Fortunately or unfortunately, we don't get a lot of practice with driving in the snow in the St. Louis area. The storm that we experienced last Friday, we haven't seen that kind of storm probably in a decade, if not more. And people are not used to driving in snow, and they forget that they have to change their mindset and get off of the automatic pilot and take into consideration things that they just assume automatically.
Kent, do you buy it that particularly out-of-town people, when they come in and they are confronted with a storm of some sort or another, say, what is wrong with us St. Louis drivers? You buy that?
Somewhat. From what I see, I think the biggest thing is I think St. Louis drivers drive the same whether it's sunny and 70. Well, maybe not sunny because we don't always drive well in the sun either. But whether it's nice and 70 or rainy or snowy, I think a lot of people just assume that they can always go do whatever they always wanted to do.
So that's the big mistake that we make.
It's
right?
the big mistake I see.
What do you think about that, Mike?
Well, that's probably certainly true. People don't do the necessary planning to anticipate the kind of problems they're going to have when the roadway is slick or snow-covered. A 20-minute commute could easily turn into a 2-hour commute or a 10-hour nightmare. And if you can avoid being out in it, certainly do that. If you can adjust your plans, make sure that if that's available, you take advantage of it. Look for the weather forecast. Some of the your driving habits have to change. I mean, if you live in an area that has hills, you're going to notice those hills, whereas they're unconscious to you under normal situations.
Kent, it seems, given what Mike just said here, it seems to me that a lot of people may be saying, well, we're going to get a little bit of snow. We normally don't get much here. Oftentimes the weather forecasters are wrong about what we're going to get. I'll just go on out and deal with it. You seeing that?
I think that's very true. Yeah. It's people's very used to it in the city, probably everywhere actually, that, the snow forecast is 10 inches. We're probably only going to get 2, so I'm not going to worry about it.
Yeah. You haven't had to deal. You've been on your job now for 10 years. You haven't had to deal with a whole lot of snow in 10 years, have you?
Not too much. We had one in 2010. I don't remember the size of that one. The most memorable for me is January 14. I forget what the snow total was, but the total wasn't the problem. It was the fact that it was single-digit temps for probably a week after that.
Well, there's another, Mike, there's another element, pardon the pun, to bring into the conversation. That is that it's not only snow on the ground, low temperatures can be a problem, too, for drivers, particularly if it's stranded.
No question about it. We were fortunate in the storm last Friday that temperatures were in pretty good shape. We weren't seeing single-digit or even teens at that time, but the storm that's coming is going to be accompanied by relatively low temperatures, somewhere in the teens, if not lower. And that presents some serious problems that you have to be prepared for if indeed your vehicle is broke down or you do run off the road. You're going to be there for a while, and you're going to have to stay warm. And you need to have some material in your vehicle in the form of additional clothing and or blankets to keep yourself warm.
What kind of a weekend did AAA have last weekend?
It was very busy last weekend. We did probably well over 1,000 what we call extrications from people who had ran off the roadway, and we go out with a winch and pull them off of the ditch or off of the, if they drove off the driveway and so forth. That was the predominant call that we have. This storm that we're looking at coming tomorrow, we're probably going to see more calls for dead batteries than what we saw last week.
Because of the temperatures.
The temperature is going to play havoc with batteries. So if you haven't had a new battery in your vehicle in the last 3 years, this weekend might be a good time to invest in a new battery.
Does your department, Kent, get into this business at all of helping drivers if they are stranded or stuck somehow?
We don't officially get into it, but we do have drivers. If they see somebody stranded, it's something easy that we can push them through a small snowdrift or whatever, we will help.
And I'm sure that happens more often than not. With regard to the low temperatures that Mike was discussing, that's going to be happening on Sunday, from what I understand it, after the snow. That can be worse than the snow itself because of icing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It looks like 36-degree temperature at midnight tonight, dropping to low teens by midnight Saturday night, and staying pretty cool through Sunday, Monday. And it doesn't really seem like much of this snow is going to be a big deal, but it is going to refreeze at some point. We're going to have a ton of moisture out there between all the rain and the snow, and we're definitely going to have to pre-treat or treat that.
So you guys are going to be busy all weekend. You're going to have to probably go out again, do you think, after the snow falls?
We will probably treat for it immediately following the snowfall or the snowfall. We'll probably be out early in the morning doing our thing, and then we'll make sure we put it to bed probably 4, 5, 6 o'clock tomorrow evening, and we'll probably put a shot of salt down on everything.
Well, what is your best advice to drivers as we approach whatever is coming this weekend?
It's pretty much always the same thing. Drive slow, be safe, keep your eyes open, drive to the best of your ability. Mm-hmm. One of the big things I always see, though, out there is, can we run city tow also? And big thing I see is tires. It's a lot of these cars that are stuck on the side of the road and haven't had tires replaced in 5 years, and that's always a problem.
That's a big mistake. Batteries, tires, have some warm clothes in the trunk of the car just in case you might need them. I'm going to ask our listeners if they want to get into the conversation. We have much to talk about, but if they want to get into the conversation with comments about maybe experiences they've had or maybe advice as well, give us a call at 382-8255. That's 382-TALK. Send us an email to talk@stlpublicradio.org, or you can send us a tweet at STL on air. I haven't read this yet, but Mario, one of our listeners, writes that driving in snow is not that hard. He says, I've driven all over the world. It's profoundly loathsome to drive in St. Louis when it snows. I know some of these people are driving that way because they are being safe when what they are doing is impeding traffic. You can drive slower where there is more snow and be safe while letting people pass. Something to learn, Mike Wright.
Well, the more experienced drivers can deal with snow much more readily than the inexperienced drivers. And it sounds like this caller indeed has had experience in the snow. So there's an awful lot of people out there that have never driven in the snow. Every year we get about 100,000 new drivers on the road. They've never experienced snow. And if we have a snowstorm every 10 years, you're talking about almost 1 million people who in the St. Louis area who have not ever experienced driving in the snow.
Why do so many people drive off the road, skid off the road, if you will?
Well, they're probably going too fast for one thing. They may hit a patch of ice under the snow. If they're turning the wheel, for example, around the curve, the tendency of the vehicle is to go straight, because they don't have the traction between the tire and the roadway that they would normally have. And that oftentimes they overbrake and cause a skid.
How about your drivers, Kent? I mean, you're not dealing with much snow over the 10 years, as we've just mentioned. How experienced and how well do they drive in the snow?
It's a very good question. We have a ton of turnover in the city in general. Probably over half my snow force is brand new. Not necessarily brand new, but brand new to this position. And so it's always a learning process. And it's really easy to go out and train when it's sunny and 70, but that's nothing compared to putting the plow down and actually dropping salt and actually making sure you're putting down salt. So it's always a training experience. I mean, our trucks handle pretty well, and the big plow in the front works as a really good brake.
It's got to be on-the-job training, because when it's snowing and the conditions are such as we've described here, they're working. They're not don't have time for training.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Well, let's take a call or two. We've got some people who have some comments, not surprisingly. We'll start with Ann, who is calling from St. Louis. Ann, you're on the line. Go ahead.
I'm from the north, and we've driven a lot in bad weather, and you never go without blankets, and just one blanket probably won't do if you're in below, freezing temperatures for any length of time. The other thing is a full tank of gas. If you get stuck in traffic even, you're going to have to use your motor to keep warm. And if you don't have a full tank of gas, you're going to be up a creek, actually going to be frozen.
You might be in the creek.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And also, if you're in heavy snow, there is a danger of, and I don't know if this is true, but there has been the story of people being suffocated because their tailpipes get blocked off. I don't know if that's true or not, but to keep the tailpipe clear.
And I think, go ahead.
No, that was it.
Okay, well, thank you for the call. Mike, you're nodding. That tailpipe thing can be a problem if you
No
back
question about
into a
it.
bank or something.
Yeah. In fact, that's good advice to have a full tank of gasoline, obviously, because you don't know how long you might be at the side of the road if you're involved either in an accident or there's an accident ahead and they shut the highway down for some reason. You're going to really need a full tank of gas, or at least a half a tank, to keep you warm.
Is there a rule of thumb? I mean, should you in wintertime be thinking about filling up your tank when you get to half a tank just because of that?
I would say if there's a storm coming, it'd be good advice to maintain a half a tank of gas, and when it gets below that, certainly fill it up.
Kent, any thoughts on that? I mean, that seems like pretty good advice.
Sounds like very good logic.
Yeah. Where are you, by the way, now in prioritizing the streets that you're going to be clearing first as we await this storm?
We have a map on our website. We do 450 miles out of the 1,100 miles of road in the city. Our first priority, obviously, are your major streets, your Kings Highway, your Union, Page, Broadway, that kind of stuff. Then we work down to some of the smaller ones, such as your Compton, Spring, etc. Then after that, we go down to what we call the hill routes, which is anything or any street with a grade of greater than 8.3%. Sounds very sophisticated. It's not that sophisticated, but so we work. That's how we work our way down through our priorities.
Well, I hate to even bring this up, but you know as well as I do that a lot of people probably give your office a call because my street hasn't been done. Why not?
I knew this was going to come up today.
Sure.
Absolutely. So we have 600. If we have 450 miles, we do. We get 650, we don't do. We do go back to those depending on how long the storm is, based on Citizen Service Bureau complaints. That's put into the city's office. It takes all our complaints, and we will go visit each one of those locations. As far as the rest of them, there have been talks about having procedures to go into other side streets. the weird thing with this last storm was it was predicted that it was going to be 36 the next day, 37 the day after that, and 48 on Tuesday. Of course, that didn't happen. So if we would have known it was going to be cold or under 32 for 3-4 days, we would have probably changed our outlook on that.
How about alleys?
Alleys are only plowed if the refuse truck cannot make it down the alleyway.
So it's not the homeowner, it's the garbage truck. Huh?
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I get that.
You got to pick up garbage.
Sure, I understand that. Let's take another call. We're bringing Margot calling from St. Louis. Margot, thanks for waiting. You're on the air.
Hi. I have one more suggestion for people on the roads is that they have more than one gear, even in an automatic. And to get up these little bitty hills, sometimes you have to drop it into second or even into first. And last week, people were honking at me because my car wasn't making it up this incline on Lee May Ferry. So I moved it over off of the ice on the road to snow so my tires would grip. And the guy behind me was mad because I wasn't going fast enough in that lane.
All right. Well, are you finished?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for the call. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I think she did the right thing. She got some traction with the snow as opposed to spinning her wheels on ice.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't do shifting very well these days, and modern-day cars are not given to doing a lot of shifting. So anticipate the hills is the best advice I can give. Get a running start if it's available and keep going.
Well, we talked a little while ago about one of the problems is people driving too fast under conditions like this. What about driving too slowly?
Too slowly can cause you some serious concerns, particularly if you're in a hilly area. If you're not going down the hill at a sufficient speed to get up the next one, you're not going to make it. You're just going to spin out. So you have to adjust your speed going both downhill as well as going uphill.
One of the things that is also a problem, Ken, and this isn't in your bailiwick, but it's an interesting observation from one of our listeners. What about pedestrians out there? Some of the sidewalks and intersections were pretty awful in recent days, and you can get hurt trying to walk on those sidewalks. Any thoughts?
Well, we have ordinance that says you're supposed to clean your sidewalks. There's not much enforcement of that ordinance or any. We actually go through the business districts to inspect those. So anything downtown, like South Grand Business District and the current business district here where we are. And we also do it up around BJC and the other hospitals. So we go through and at least make sure the wheelchair ramps are cleaned off and at least the beginning of pedestrian traffic can start. But as far as cleaning off a business's front steps or a resident, they're required to do that.
I get it. Okay, Mike, back to you. I asked Kent a little while ago about what preparations he's making right now for what's coming this weekend. What about AAA?
AAA is prepared for just about anything. Last weekend, for example, we put some of our call takers up in hotels on Friday nights in anticipation of their having difficulty getting in Saturday. In addition to that, we have a lot of our call takers that work from home, so they don't even have to commute in order to take roadside assistance calls. In addition to that, we have our own fleet of vehicles that we're preparing and getting the necessary drivers aligned to work appropriate shifts.
So it's a lot of pre-planning and a lot of getting ready, and all that's happening now. When do you start? When do you start that kind of prep? This forecast has been in the works now for a couple of days.
Well, we really start as winter starts. We were well prepared for the storm that we had last week, and we've continued pretty much throughout the week. A lot of people who ran off the road, they abandoned their vehicle, for example, on Friday or Saturday, and they got to it on Monday or Tuesday to get it out of there and get it to a repair facility. So we've been busy ever since.
MoDOT was criticized the last weekend because of the highway situation, the number of people stranded. But that's really not MoDOT's fault, is it? I mean, you can't plow when there's a bunch of cars standing in the way.
That is a huge problem. And, media, everybody said, hey, well, let's back this up a little bit. Originally, the snow was supposed to come in after 6 p.m. Then I think within 12, 24 hours in advance of that, Then they bumped it up to about noon. So I think all the employers out there said, well, we're going to be smart. We're going to get people out here at 12 or 1. Well, the snow started falling at 1:30. So if you can't get out there, it's hard to fix and keep things moving.
What are the kinds of ordinances are out there? You mentioned the sidewalk, and we're required to keep them clean. What other ordinances are out there that people may not know about that they should?
Oh, I can't think of any right off the top of my head, but we got plenty of ordinances out there. Many of them most people don't know about.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back to our listeners. Bill had just sent this in an email. He writes, a serious problem is drivers who do not use headlights when it's snowing or raining. During the daytime, dark-colored cars can be almost invisible during a storm. I've talked to some who have said they had no idea that headlights are required by law when windshield wipers are needed. That's right, Mike.
That's absolutely correct. Missouri has had that law for a number of years, and most other states also require headlights when wipers are in use. Unfortunately, there's an awful lot of people that are totally oblivious to the need for having their headlights and taillights on when the wipers are in demand.
Yeah. How can people kind of review things like this? I mean, we take a driver's test when we're 16, 17 years old, and 50 years later, we've never taken another test.
Well, it's a good idea to do a checklist, not only for yourself, but loved ones who have to be driving in this kind of thing. One, make sure that the vehicle that they're operating is in good repair, that the tires are properly, their air pressure is proper, that they have an inflatable spare and the necessary jack to change it, as well as that the battery is in good condition. And then they need to decide what happens in the event of a breakdown. What do they have in the car to assist them if they need to be in that car for a long period of time? A lot of people, for example, have to have medication. And if they're in a car sitting in a traffic for 4 or 5 hours, they could be in a serious medical condition.
You're really saying plan for the worst case scenario.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's better to have and not need than to need and not have.
Let's take a caller. Jim in Belleville wants to get into the discussion, so let's bring him in. Jim, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi. Having grown up in Chicago where there's a lot more snowfall, when we were taught to drive, you usually go out the first time there's a snow, and you actually practice going into a slight fishtail and steering out of it. You got to do it someplace safe. And I think here there's so little snow that drivers don't have an opportunity to do that. But another thing that happens down here is with all the bridge complexes, we didn't really have those up in Chicago because the bridges can get especially slick.
Thanks for the call. I mentioned at the outset that a lot of people from out of town complain about the way we drive here, but a lot of those people are coming from places like Chicago and Colorado, where to them it's almost second nature to do this sort of thing. Okay, let's see. Emily writes on Twitter, what can be done about damage caused by vehicles by city plows? Caused to vehicles by city.
Yep, it goes back to our CSB number, our customer service number, 622-4800. If anytime, use CSB for everything. Essentially, if you get a pothole, use CSB. If you have a damage claim, and if it needs to be reported to CSB, everything starts off with the city with CSB.
Yeah. Well, that's what you have to do. Okay, to start that way. We also have a listener named Teak on Twitter asking, can citizens legally plow residential streets on their own?
I would say we wouldn't support that, but as long as you're doing a normal, good job and not pushing snow out in the middle of one of our major streets, it's probably acceptable.
And don't forget the sidewalks. Right. Let's take another call. Dennis is calling us. He's actually calling us from Mexico, believe it or not, but let's hear what he has to say. Go ahead, Dennis.
Sure. So now, for years, a friend of mine and I, Don, we used to talk about cities where basically the streets in the city evolved before there was many cars as there are now. So we still have we have expectations that are you just can't reach them. And so as a retiree, I would suggest retirees, if you don't have to go out, stay home and leave it to the people that have to be out there. And the second thing is when the snow comes, if you are somebody that's going to go out and have to shovel, go out about 3 hours in and get that first little shot off of there, and then go back later because it's easier rather than trying to shovel a foot of snow. But the high expectations, we have immediate gratification. We have remotes, and we don't have the 5-year-old kid that changes the channel anymore.
Dennis, thank you for the call, Dennis. He's calling from Mexico and giving us advice on snow. That's an easy one, Dennis, but thank you for the call. And Malcolm in Florissant writes, and this is something that I think a lot of people take into consideration or don't take into consideration. A serious problem caused because many people are driving SUVs, many with four-wheel drive. They think they're immune from any kind of a problem on the roadway and immune from the laws of physics. And even with 12-wheel drive, ice is still ice. That is a problem. You can't see around a lot of these bigger SUVs.
Well, that is a problem, and a lot of the drivers of SUVs think just because that they have four-wheel drive, they can go anywhere, but it doesn't help you stopping.
True. All right, leave it at that. Any final thoughts? We're going to wrap this up, but Kent, you have final thoughts or advice you can give our folks as they wait for the next snow?
I mean, as always, just be safe out there. Go slow. If it has anything to do with my snow plows, give them plenty of room. We probably can't see you. We're worried about 5 other things going on. And just give us plenty of room and always drive safe out there.
How closely do you work with MoDOT, by the way?
Not that close. We have phone call conversations typically before a storm, and that's about it.
Yeah. And Mike Wright, what's your final thought, the advice and takeaway you want people to have from this?
Well, for those that are interested in learning more about winter driving, we have an excellent website. If you'll just go to a search engine and type in AAA winter driving, we've got videos as well as printed material out there that'll help you get through the winter.
All right. We'll put a link to that website on ours at stlpublicradio.org. I want to thank you both so much for being with us and talking about this. It's, we make light of the fact of the way people drive, but it's not a laughing matter by any stretch of the imagination. Kent Flake, Mike Wright, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Have a safe weekend. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.